The Dolphins come away with a Sunday night football victory. This and more right after this. The Miami Dolphins would come away with a 16-10 victory over the visiting Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday Night Football in Miami Gardens. Let's talk stats, facts, and more. The Dolphins would be led in passing by the return of our franchise quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, who would go 21 out of 35, throwing for 261 yards. With an average of 7.5 yards per pass, throwing a touchdown, not getting sacked once, although finishing with a QBR of 41.6 and an overall passer rating of 92.7. When it comes to rushing, the Dolphins will be led by Raheem Mostert, who would go 16 carries for 79 yards on a 4.9 average per carry. Chase Edmonds would come in as a distant second, going 7 carries for 17 yards. In the receiving game, the Fins would be led by Jalen Waddle, who will haul down 4 out of 5 targets for 88 yards with an average of 22 yards per reception. Tyreek Hill would come second, hauling in 7 receptions out of 13 targets, going for 72 yards with an average yards per catch of 10.3 yards. Raheem Mostert would be the other one that I think distinguished himself well in the passing game, receiving 4 passes, 4 out of 5 targets, 30 yards, and scoring the touchdown, the lone touchdown of this game for the Fins. Defensively, the Dolphins would be led by Andrew Van Ginkel, who would total 11 total tackles, 6 of them going for solo, followed by Justin Bethel, the regular special teamer who looked solid in his role replacing Nick Needham, who was lost for the season last week against the Minnesota Vikings. Justin Bethel will finish with 9 total tackles, 7 of them solo. Jalen Phillips would come in third, registering 8 total tackles, 4 of them solo, and also finishing with 1.5 sacks, 2 tackles for losses, and 2 quarterback hits. Overall, the Dolphins would finish with 2 total sacks. The other half a sack would be shared with Christian Wilkins, who would finish 6 total tackles, 4 of them solo, along with a quarterback hit. Defensively, the Dolphins finally were able to register turnovers in this game. The Dolphins would have 3 total interceptions, one that started it off for the Fins by Justin Bethel. Second one, which seemed to have put the game out of reach, by Javon Holland. But then the true nail in the coffin in what I can guarantee you was an interception to really, hopefully, put his career in a new light and in a new track. Noah Igbenogany, first rounder of the 2020 NFL Draft, would come away with the game-sealing, game-winning interception in the dying seconds of the game. In the kicking game, Jason Sanders also had a decent comeback game. He would go 3 out of 3 with a long of 47 yards. Thomas Morstead would punt the ball 6 times and would total 256 yards with a 42.7 average per punt. 4 of his punts going inside the 20 and having a longest day of 53 yards. Let's go ahead and look at the Pittsburgh Steelers and who was leading the way for them. Kenny Pickett would go 32 out of 44 for 257 yards with an average pass average of 5.8 yards, throwing a touchdown, getting intercepted 3 times, being sacked twice for 11 yards, finishing with a QBR of 44.8 and an overall passer rating of 66.2. The Steelers will be led in rushing by Najee Harris, who would get 17 carries, going for 65 yards, with an average of 3.8 yards per carry. Kenny Pickett would be a distant second, rushing it 3 times for 20 yards, with an average of 6.7 yards per rush. Receiving, the Steelers would be led by Pat Freiermuth, who would haul 8 receptions off of 9 targets, going for 75 yards with an average of 9.4 yards per catch. Pickens would come in at second with 6 receptions, going for 61 yards off of 6 targets, and he would score the lone touchdown for the Steelers as well. That touchdown looking eerily similar to the Mike Wallace tiptoe touchdown in the Super Bowl against the Cardinals so many years ago. The Steelers would also have Johnson going 5 receptions for 42 yards and Chase Claypool going 5 receptions for 41 yards. The Steelers were not able to garner or register any turnovers. Defensively, they would be led by Miles Jack going 10 tackles, 7 of them going solo. Devin Bush would come in second at 6 total tackles, 5 of them solo, with a tackle for loss along with a pass defense. Former Miami Dolphin Minkah Fitzpatrick would get 6 total tackles for 4 of them going solo, along with a pass defense. And then Cam Hayward would get 5 total tackles, 4 of them solo, with a tackle for loss. When it comes to the kicking game, the Steelers would have 1 field goal attempt, and they would go 1 for 1. Chris Boswell would go 1 for 1 with a 45-yard field goal, along with going 1 for 1 from extra point land. In the punting game, Presley Harvin III would get 6 total punts, going 2 for 251 yards, averaging 41.8 yards per punt, 2 of them going inside the 20 and having a long this day of 57 yards. So let's talk about a few of the facts of this game. And the fact remains, and really is the most important game, because this game it looked like it was going to start out as a shootout. But then once the Dolphins scored that first touchdown, it was pretty much a snooze fest for the entirety of the game. Now, me being a Dolphins fan, I'm on edge the entire game. But I got to say, for just the regular football fan who likes football and just likes to follow it, it was pretty much a snooze fest for the most part. Nonetheless, the Finns made a game out of it, especially defensively. I think that if you like defense, this game had a lot of it. All of the points were scored in the first half, and then the second half was essentially whose defense and whose punting unit could pin the team in the worst possible position. When it comes to the rematch, or perceived rematch there, that is, of Tua facing his former coach, Brian Flores, who is the linebackers coach along with being a senior defensive assistant. Tua didn't really mention anything about it. As a matter of fact, he even said that he had not spoken to Brian Flores. And really, I think both Brian and Tua really kept everything on the DL, if you know what I mean. Overall, this game itself is hopefully a predicate to things to come for the Finns, as they're about to endure a relatively easy portion of their schedule, facing the Lions, Bears, and Browns, followed by the Texans and 49ers consecutively. This makes 5 total games that I think are very winnable until you have to face the San Diego Chargers on December 11th at 4:05 p.m. I think that's where the schedule gets really crazy for the Finns because they're facing the Chargers, the Bills, the Packers, the Patriots, and the surprising Jets. That makes potentially one of the more difficult stretches of this NFL season for the Finns. So I got to say that the next 5 games are imperative to win. The Dolphins could end up facing the Chargers going 9-3 should they win the next 5. And I think the Chargers game is a feasibly winnable game. And I would even say so is the Patriots game. The Jets are no longer the Jets, it seems. I feel like the Jets have finally woken up from their slumber for the last, it seems, 10 years. I feel like the last time they were good is when Mark Sanchez and Rex Ryan took that team all the way to the AFC Championship game in what ended up being the butt fumble game against the New England Patriots. Bottom line is, we win these 5 games coming up, and we win 1 out of those 4 games at the end of the season versus the versus the Bills, Packers, Patriots, and the Jets. I think the Dolphins have to be a lock for the playoffs. And dare I say, you win 2 out of those 4, they are locked for having a home game in the playoffs, which I think will be imperative for winning a playoff game for the first time since the year 2000. I was 7 years old the last time. I was 6 years old the last time the Dolphins won a playoff game. And ever since, I've endured, much like the rest of you, in this mediocrity that we've seen ever since the Dolphins beat the Colts in that game, which would lead us to the game in which Dan Marino would be cruelly taken out of his NFL career. As I said, the Dolphins are facing the Lions this week. They are on the road as they look to go and improve to 5-3 on the season, facing their former coach, interim coach that is, Dan Campbell, who, despite the team being 1-5, is doing a pretty good job, respectively. I think the Lions are a few years away from being any type of good, being that they have so many holes, both defensively and on their offensive front. This game is going to be pivotal for setting up the next 4 games, which you win this game in the next 4, as I mentioned, you set yourself up for an extremely, extremely high probability of making the playoffs and actually doing damage in the playoffs. But all of this will rest in the hands and head of Tua Tagovailoa. How he stays healthy, if he stays healthy, is going to be the key for any type of success for the Finns this year. As you know and you've seen what the Dolphins' offense looks like without Tua at the helm. It's going to be an exciting 5 games, to say the least. I know I'm excited, and I hope you are too. Thanks so much for listening to another edition of Instant Reaction of Miami Dolphins football in the 2022 season. I'll see and hear you next time when we look to recap another Dolphins victory against the Detroit Lions.